try and do a little bit is, I suppose, lay a foundation for where we're going to be going in the next few meetings. And Mike and I really feel that what we want to try and share as best we can is some of the stuff that we've been discovering in the Bible that teaches us about how to have a relationship with God, but also about how to have a relationship with one another. And Mike's going to be talking a fair bit about that tomorrow, but I really want to kick us off with a talk on a theme that is something that's often confused me, and it's friendship. And it's a slightly strange talk to begin a conference with, but I really felt like God spoke to me strongly and said that I was to do it tonight, so here we go. One of the reasons that friendship has confused me is because no one ever teaches you how to have a friendship, do they? So there's loads of stuff around in our culture that's all about romantic relationships, and we're obsessed with romantic relationships. So you see that in the films that we watch, and you see it in all the adverts there are for dating websites, uniformdating.com, if you fancy people in uniform or just whatever, or you work in a uniform. You know, there are all these other things that they draw us towards these romantic relationships. And even in the education system, there's teaching about sex education and all of that. But no one ever teaches you how to have a friendship. And not in a formal way anyway. And so what we often do is we have to discover that for ourselves, and that is a confusing process, and it's often full of mistakes and things that we're not quite sure about. And I remember when I was at university, I vividly remember there were times, I had friends at university, but there were definitely times when I felt quite lonely. And I remember times when I would come in to my college. There was like this big quad, and there was a bar in one of the corners of the colleges. And I remember coming in late at night where I'd been out with some of my friends from a sports team or something, and I would come in and hear the noise coming from the bar that was filling this quad. And I would walk around it, and to get to my room, I had to walk past the entrance to the bar. So I remember walking around it and then hearing all the hubbub inside the bar. It sounds like everyone was having a great time in there. And wanting to go in, really wanting to go in and pausing, but never actually managing to, more often than not, because I was afraid that there wouldn't be anyone in there that I knew. I didn't have many friends in my college. And so I also remember going, they have like a little Harry Potter dining hall there, and I remember I would always get my food, and I wouldn't be able to relax until I'd walk through into the dining room and seen one of the maybe 10 people in the college that I knew well enough to go and sit with. And there would be times when I would go and sit by myself, because there wasn't anyone, and eat my dinner as fast as I could and then leave. And I remember I wasn't chronically lonely in any sense. I did have friends, but certainly there were times when I had this real loneliness going on, and it confused me. I didn't know what to make of it. And actually, one of the things that's becoming increasingly clear about our culture and our society is that it is breeding this thing of loneliness. So Jeremy Hunt, the health secretary, said last year there was a study on the elderly, and he was talking about how there are 800,000 elderly people in our country who suffer from chronic loneliness. And the group that suffer with loneliness second most after the elderly is actually us, surprisingly. It's the 20s and 30s. And what loneliness is it's not so much not being around people. You can be lonely and around people. You can be lonely in a marriage. You can be lonely in an office full of people. You can be lonely in a university hall. You can be lonely in a bunch in a church even. What loneliness is it's a lack of connectedness with others. It's a lack of genuine connectedness, like I genuinely know you and you really know me. And it may be that you personally do not struggle with loneliness, but I'm willing to bet that there are many around us who do, many in your even close friendship group who will. And actually on the surface, we kind of keep a pretty good face, but underneath, if we were to see what was going on, we would see that there is that desperate loneliness. And one of the things that also comes about, I've observed from this, is that we struggle. We feel like we're not connected to people, but also we're afraid of becoming connected. And so what we can do is we can build up walls, whatever they are, by sticking our iPod headphones in and burying our head in the sand, because we grow afraid of being vulnerable. We struggle to connect, but also we don't want to connect, because if we do connect, then it's like, well, you could reject me here, or that could hurt, or I'm opening myself up here. And I remember when I was in the bar one time at university, chatting to a friend of mine called Will, and he was a little bit drunk, which I think probably was why he was telling me what he was telling me. But he'd just been dumped, and he was saying, "Oh, but don't worry, Andy, don't worry. I've, it's hurt me, but I'm okay." And he said, the reason I'm okay is because I think of myself like a castle. And he said, I've got an outer wall, and then I've got an inner wall, and then I've got a keep right in the middle. And he says, sometimes what I do is I let people behind the outer wall, and sometimes I let people behind the inner wall, but no one ever gets into the keep. That's just for me. And I knew exactly what he was talking about, because that's how I've lived for so much of my life, with the walls up and the armor on. Because although I want the connection, although I want to go into the bar, I'm also afraid that if I do, if I let someone into the keep, if I am vulnerable, then I'll get hurt. And so that leaves me pretty confused. And I'm like, how do I do this thing of having real friendships? When I talk about friendships, what I'm really referring to just in this talk is I'm talking about the few friendships that we'll have that are really, really deep. So not just lots of acquaintances, but a few really deep friendships. And if we were to look in the Bible for instructions on how to have friendships, just at a glance, what we'd see, if we were to say, let's put aside everything we're taught about relationships in our culture and just see what the book says and how it teaches us, what would we discover at a glance? A couple of things really quickly. One of the first things that we would discover is that we are made for friendship. So in Genesis chapter 2, God creates humanity. And chapter 1 and chapter 2, he creates humanity. And then he says, oh, it's very good. This is very good. This is very good. And the first not good in the Bible comes in Genesis chapter 2, verse 18. And in Genesis 2, verse 18, it says, the Lord God said, it is not good for man to be alone. It's not good for us to be alone. So paradise, which is what Eden is, on one level isn't paradise without Adam having a companion. And obviously God makes Adam Eve, but it's more than just Adam, man needs woman, Adam needs Eve. It's that people need one another. And what I've often thought is that, well, you know, I've got God, and if I've got God, I've got everything. I don't need anyone else. God doesn't agree with that statement. God thinks that we need other people. Paradise isn't paradise until there are other people. And what we know this instinctively. Timothy Keller talks about it in one of his books, The Meaning of Marriage. He's saying that actually instinctively we recognize that if someone has a massive house and a nice car and loads of money, but they live in the house by themselves and they have no one to share it with, we know that that isn't paradise. Part of creating paradise involves having people to share it with. So this thing in us that craves real connectedness is actually from God. We're made for that. The second thing that we see, if we just glance through the Bible when we're looking for friendships, is we see that good friendships are rare. They're few and far between. And again, one of the things that this does is this clashes with our culture because, again, Facebook, for example, how many friends have you got? We could do a little survey. I've got 322 friends, and we compare how many friends we have. And what we do automatically is first of all, we feel very sorry for the people that have got 4 friends on Facebook, don't we? My word, you must be new to Facebook. That's the only explanation for having so few friends. We should set up a support group just for you. But what we do, that's what we do, isn't it? We compare, and what we probably subconsciously assume is the higher the number of friends, the less likely you are to be lonely. And actually, that I don't think there is a correlation at all like that. What the Bible teaches is it's not about the numerical, the number of friends we have. It's about the depth of those friendships. And we see a few great friendships in the Bible. You can see Moses and Joshua, David and Jonathan, Ruth and Naomi, Paul and Timothy. Even Jesus only had a few close friends, Peter, James and John. And within them, maybe John was his best mate, maybe Peter was. But you see that friendships, they're rare. And this idea that we can have hundreds of close friends is a myth. It's not true. We can only ever have a few. And then the third thing, quickly, that we see in the scripture is that it teaches that good friendships are costly. They cost a lot. And again, that was news to me when I began to discover that, because my understanding of friendship was that good friends would just come to me on a plate. Arrive at university and I'm expecting all of my friends to come and just want to be friends with me. And my focus became, actually, I need to make myself the most attractive person I possibly can, because that's how you get great friends. So I need to do all that, be gifted and wear the right clothes and all of that and big myself up. And if I do that, then maybe all these people will come to me and they will want to be my friends. And actually, again, what we see is, as so often is the case with the Bible, it's the reverse of that. The focus to grow a great friendship, to have great friends, to have those deep companions that we live for the whole of our lives with. The focus is not, I've got to big myself and make myself attractive so these people just come to me and they want to be my friends. The focus is the reverse. It's I've got to go to them. I've got to choose to go out to them. And Jesus, in John chapter 15, verse 12, he talks a bit about the cost of friendship. And he says, my command is this: love one another as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. And so one of the things that I want to suggest that means is that think of a relationship that you have. If that relationship does not involve self-giving love, then it may well not really be friendship. It may be an acquaintance. But friendship involves the laying down of a life. It's this costly thing. And that's really the starting place for much of what we're going to say over the next couple of days. And I'm just going to look tonight at two friends that really teach us how to do this. Because the key, if we finish with that thing of it's about going to others, the key to this thing of friendship is it's not, what do I need to do to get some great friends? It's about how do we go and be great friends. And I want to look at Ruth and Naomi, and you can find Ruth and Naomi in the book of Judges. If you have your Bible with you, you might want to open with me to Ruth chapter 1, but it'll come up on the screen if you haven't got it. The book of Ruth actually begins with the story of Naomi. And Naomi is an Israelite. She's married to a Jew. And they move because there's a famine in Israel. They move to this land called Moab. And in Moab, what happens is Naomi's husband dies. And she's got two sons. And the sons both marry Moabite women. And after about 10 years, both of Naomi's sons also die. So she's left in the land of Moab with her two daughters-in-law. And at this point, Naomi decides, okay, I'm going to return back to the land of Israel because life in Moab sucks, so I'm going home. So she gets up and she goes off, and her two daughters-in-law follow her for a little bit. And there's this scene on the road on the way back to Israel where Naomi turns to her daughters-in-law and she basically says to them, you need to stay here. There's nothing for you back in Israel. That's where we're going to pick up the story. So if you have your Bible in Ruth chapter 1, verse 8, I'll start to read. Then Naomi said to her two daughters-in-law, go back, each of you, to your mother's home. May the Lord show you kindness as you have shown kindness to your dead husbands and to me. May the Lord grant that each of you will find rest in the home of another husband. Then she kissed them goodbye, and they wept aloud and said to her, we will go back with you to your people. But Naomi said, return home, my daughters. Why would you come to me? Am I going to have any more sons who could become your husbands? That sounds a bit weird, but basically the nearest male relative would have to marry the wife of the deceased husband if they didn't have an heir to pass on. So, yeah, that's what they did. Strange. Am I going to have any more sons who could become your husbands? Return home, my daughters. I am too old to have another husband. And even if I thought there was still hope for me, even if I had a husband tonight and then gave birth to sons, would you wait until they grew up? Would you remain unmarried for them? No, my daughters, it is more bitter for me than for you because the Lord's hand has turned against me. At this, they wept aloud again. Then Orpah kissed her mother-in-law goodbye, but Ruth clung to her. The first time recorded in Scripture where anyone clings to their mother-in-law, but she does so. And then it says, look, said Naomi, your sister-in-law is going back to her people and her gods. Go back with her. So Ruth has got this key decision there on the road, and the pressure's off, really, because Naomi has said, I want you to go. I want you to go back. And Orpah has actually gone off and left, so she's not going to look back because the other daughter-in-law's gone home as well. And Naomi says a second time, no, go, go, go. But Ruth clings to her, and then she says these amazing words. And if we get these words, we get how to grow great friendships. She says this, verse 16, but Ruth replied, don't urge me to leave you or turn back from you. Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if even death separates you and me. How do we become great friends? The secret is what Ruth says, I will go with you, I will stay with you, and I will die with you. The first one, I'm going to go with you, says Ruth. If you're here with your boyfriend or girlfriend or your husband or wife, do you want to just stand where you are? All the couples in the room, why don't you just stand? It'd be interesting to actually see how many there are. How many's left for the rest of us? You all thinking it. Okay. Where's your... Oh, he's at the other end of the row. Okay, all right. So we might want to just observe these people over the next couple of days, because what you'll probably find is if you say to these guys, oh, hey, come, let's go have a drink at the bar at the end, you might find yourself sitting there, and then they'll just turn to each other and they'll look at each other in the eye and they'll just start having a nice little chat together. You might invite them to come with you to the rapids, and after a little while they'll probably disappear and you'll wonder, where have they gone? And then you will find them 10 minutes later in the jacuzzi, just sitting on each other's laps, just looking into each other's eyes. You might say, hey, we need to get out of here, let's go do some archery, and then you go and take them to do some archery, which is a bit more fun, isn't it? And then one or two of them, you'll glance over and probably the girl will be there with a little bow, and then the man will be standing behind her saying, no, darling, it's like this, and they'll be looking at each other like that. All right, you guys can sit down. See if that happens over the next little while, okay? See if they do that. The point that I'm trying to make is that when you're lovers, when it's a romantic relationship, the way that you are is it's like you looking each other in the face all the time. You're always looking each other in the eye, face to face. With friends, it's different from that. It's not face to face. It's a bit more like shoulder to shoulder. It's a bit more like side to side. And what you do as friends is you have a common goal, maybe a common object that the two of you are looking at together. And C.S. Lewis, one of the things he talks about when he's writing about this is he says friendships, they always have to be about something. Lovers, they can just stare at each other forever. But friendship is always built on something. And he puts it like this. He says, people who simply want friends can never make any. Friendship must be about something, even if it were only an enthusiasm for dominoes or white mice. He's obviously writing at a time when white mice were very exciting. Even if it's only enthusiasm for dominoes or white mice, those who have nothing can share nothing. Those who are going nowhere can have no fellow travelers. He's saying when you form a friendship, you form it about something. There's this common purpose. And so one of the things that, again, Tim Keller talks about a little bit with this, he says what that means is with real good friendships, often we think, I'm just going to make myself a really good friendship, and you just pick a victim and then you go for it. And it's like, actually, that's not really generally how it works. What great friendships are is they're discovered. It's almost like you see someone, you're like, oh my word, you like that too. And instantly you hit it off. You discover there's this common passion, this common purpose that you have. And as Christians, we all share that to a degree. We all have the common passion of Jesus Christ. That's what we're about, this supernatural delight. And so I don't know if you've ever had that experience where you're sitting on a train next to someone and you're both Christians, but you don't know until one of you blows your cover. And then suddenly, it's like, oh my word, you're a Christian too. And then you've been there. So you suddenly like, oh, we could chat about that. You start talking. Where do you go to church? Oh, how did you become a Christian? There's that instant connection, isn't there? And in friendships, first of all, as Christians, we have that great joy that we can form a deep friendship because the common goal is always going to be Jesus Christ. But actually, again, what happens is the best friendships, they often form where the supernatural interest coincides with natural interests as well. So my bet is that your closest friends, there'll be plenty of great friendships with people who don't know the Lord, but often our closest friends are with someone who knows Jesus, but also someone who also likes what we like. They like to do the things that we do. And Mike and I, we have Mike is probably my best friend, or he's my best friend. And shut up. Flipping heck. And one of the things that we do is we obviously have a common passion and a common goal, as does Beth. And the goal is we want to influence the church in some small way in the coming years. We want to reach young people for Jesus Christ and help them to live the whole of their lives. And that's part of what binds us together. It's this common purpose that we want to go somewhere. But we also share natural interests as well. And I've grown to love food as I've hung around with Mike, although less and less, you may have noticed, over the last little while. But also, we like to compete, and we make no secret of that. And one of the things that we do is we compete in squash. And more often than not, I lose, and then Mike tweets about it, and then I am humiliated. Although if you want to go at some point this weekend and just ask him what the score was in our last 2 games, I'm sure he would love to share that with you. And he's been kind of getting fit and losing weight recently. And one of the things that, a little while ago, he was in Australia, just the other month, actually. And we kind of keeping each other going with our fitness and things. And he sent me this text, and he said, "Did you get to the gym this morning? I went twice yesterday, and I'm going again this morning. I need to make sure I build muscle. Can you see how I am preparing for you? It is no longer about staying alive and being healthy. It is about beating you." And I could read you any number of 100 of texts that are pretty much like that. And so the point I'm trying to make is, with Ruth, when she spoke to Naomi, they had this, she's like, "I'm going somewhere with you. I'm going to go somewhere with you. We're not just going to sit here and look at each other and this is how friendship grows." It's that we've got a common purpose. We have to make a new life. It's all gone wrong here in Moab. I'm going to come back, and together we're going to forge a life. Friendships, great friendships, they happen when we find someone. It's like, "Oh my word, you too? You have that passion as well? Let's go somewhere together." It's about going somewhere together. The second thing, I'll stay with you. This one is a really hard one. I found it really hard. And what this is it's about commitment. And for Ruth in that moment, it would have been so easy to walk away from Naomi for any number of reasons. Number one, Naomi is a bitter old woman by this stage. So she gets back to Israel and they say, "Oh, hey, Naomi," which means pleasant. And she says, "Don't call me Naomi anymore. My life's all gone wrong. Just call me bitter. That can be my new name. Hello. Do you want to come around for dinner?" You don't want to hang around with people called bitter, do you? So that's the first reason why it's hard to stay with Naomi. The second reason why, as far as I can see, it's hard to stay with Naomi is because Ruth has no prospects in Israel. She's a Moabite. She's a foreigner. It was actually against Jewish law for an Israelite to marry a Moabite in the first place. So for her, she's basically consigning herself to never really being able to give children, have a husband, have children, which in that culture would have made you an outcast anyway. And she's going back to Israel where she will be a foreigner. And people will be wary of her. She's leaving all of her prospects behind. And yet she decides to stick with Naomi and to stay with her. And Naomi does what all of us do when life has become quite difficult. What she does is she pushes Ruth away. She automatically just pushes Ruth away. And what we will find with those people that we want to commit to being friends to, you know those people? What we will find with them, I imagine, is that when their life becomes hard, when something goes wrong, maybe they have a breakup, maybe they lose their job, maybe they get diagnosed with an illness, maybe it's something else. When their life goes wrong, often they do what many of us do, which is they push those who are closest to them furthest away. They say no. And there's all sorts of reasons for that. The reason I do it is because partly it's my pride. I don't want people to see me in a bad place. But the other reason is also I don't want to be a burden to anyone. I don't want to be a burden to you. And I remember when I was working at a hospital a little while ago, I was working as a chaplain there. And I had a conversation, in one day I had a conversation with 3 elderly patients who all told me they wanted to die. And when I said, "Well, why are you saying that?" They said, "I don't want to be a burden to the people that I love." What we do is we push people away and we put our walls up. And this is the challenge for us as the friends. The challenge is to press on through anyway, even when it seems like they don't want you to be there. And I think this comes, I was thinking about an illustration for this, and the best picture I can come up with is from The Lord of the Rings. So you might not have seen those films, they're a little old now, but there's this, basically, in a nutshell, The Lord of the Rings is about Frodo chucking this evil ring in a giant volcano, and it's just 9 hours long. And so Frodo sets off in the Fellowship of the Ring with his buddies, and there's this particular point where Frodo's like, "Oh my word, this burden is so heavy, this place I'm going to is so dangerous, this giant volcano, they might fall in it. What am I going to do? I know what I'll do is I'll push them away effectively. I will sneak off by myself. No, Ruth, you go home, I'm off this way." So what he does is in the middle of this battle with all these orcs going on, Frodo slips on the ring, he becomes invisible, and he sneaks away, and he gets in this boat, and he's just rowing off to the land land of Mordor all by himself. And then Sam, his faithful little hobbit man friend, realizes that Frodo is getting away. He realizes what's going on. So he runs down to the river where Frodo's in this boat, and he puts on his giant rucksack. And then he starts going, I'm acting this out if you haven't seen the film. This is exactly how it happens. Mr. Frodo, come back to me. And so he starts running down, and Frodo is rowing away, and he says, no, Sam, no, you stay there, I'm going, this is too dangerous. And he's like, Mr. Frodo, and then he wades into the water, and he starts to swim towards Frodo. Because he's got his rucksack on, he starts to sink, and he's sinking, and he's drowning, and Frodo's like, no, Sam, go, you're going to drown. And Sam's like, no, I'm coming with you, Mr. Frodo. And eventually Frodo realizes that either Sam is going to get in the boat and come with him, or he is going to die. And so Frodo grabs him, and he hauls Sam into the boat, and Sam sits there coughing up water, spluttering, and he says, where did you think you were going, Frodo? Where did you think you were going without your Sam? There will be people in your life who, when it gets difficult, they will push you away. Not because they want you to go, but because either they can't bear you to see them as they are, or because they just can't face being a burden. The job of any human being, but especially those of us who follow Jesus Christ, is to chase after them anyway. I am staying with you. And the word is commitment. And on one level, what that sounds like is it sounds like an agony aunt thing from a magazine. The biblical word is covenant. I promise to stick with you, come what may. And the easy part is making that commitment. The hard part is keeping it. Because when they push you away, it's really tough, isn't it? But what the Lord asks of us, and what any friendship is, you press on anyway. I'm going to stay with you. And then the final thing, and Ruth, I don't know if she went to drama school or something, but she's kind of building up to this big climax because she's like, I'm going to go with you. I'm going to stay with you. And then she says, and where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. I'm going to die with you, and then they're going to bury my corpse on top of your corpse. And even in the grave, we're going to be hanging out together, Naomi. And any good friendship, what it involves is this thing of dying to the other. And again, we're going to be looking a lot at the way in which the scripture, so often what it does is it subverts what we're taught in all sorts of ways, in music and culture, everything around us. But what often in the world around us we're taught is the primary expression of love is sex. And in the Bible, what we discover is the primary expression of love is not sex, it's sacrifice. And it's choosing to sacrifice for another. And to be a friend that dies for the other is incredibly difficult, but it works out in all sorts of really normal ways. One way is forgiveness. It's when someone hurts us, it's choosing to forgive that. And any great friendship, if we haven't had a couple of arguments along the way, then it probably hasn't matured yet. It's going to involve forgiveness that's painful and costly. Also, what it's going to involve is it's going to involve truth, speaking truth to one another. And again, I have been so grateful for the people that God has brought into my life. There's a few of them, but just because you know who he is, I'll mention Mike again. One of the things that he does is he speaks truth to me. And it's easier not to sometimes. But if you really love them, you tell them what sometimes they need to hear, even if they don't want to hear it. And I remember not long after I left university, we were in a car together. And I went to university in Cambridge. And Cambridge is a sort of place where really it's quite a proud environment. And it kind of breeds pride. And I remember after leaving, I was just in the car. We were driving along somewhere. And Mike said something. And I made a little comment off the cuff. I can't remember what it was now, but I said something, and then after a few minutes, I just stopped, and I thought, gosh, that was an incredibly arrogant thing to say. And I just turned to Mike, and I said, Mike, I think I might have become quite arrogant. And do you know what he said? He said, yes, Andy, I've been meaning to talk to you about that. The git. But he wasn't joking. It was like, yeah, you have? And that was like, ouch. But I needed to hear it. And there've been other times too. Like I was just doing a mission at Oxford University, doing like evangelism stuff. And Mike came to support me on the first night with Beth. And, afterwards he gave me feedback, and he's always brutal with his feedback. And he said, Andy, the talk went really well, but in the Q&A, you came across as a bit of a knob. And and then he started doing this impression of me and exaggerating it completely. And I was just sitting there dying. But it's like, thank goodness he did. Because everybody else is like, oh, yeah, they don't give you any real feedback. They don't tell you really how it went. They just sort of say, yeah. But it was like, oh, thank goodness that you do that. Again, in Proverbs, what we see is as iron sharpens iron, so one friend sharpens another. If it's a long-term thing, if it's a real commitment thing, then what you do is you speak truth, and that's sometimes painful, but you do it out of a place of love, but also you forgive, and that costs. And it's constantly choosing to prefer one another. And what these vows that Ruth makes to Naomi remind me of, and this is a covenant that she's making, what it reminds me of more than anything is marriage. It's like, I'm going to go with you, I'm going to stay with you, I'm going to die with you. Till death do us part, Naomi. I'm in this for life. Can it be the case that those vows are only ever meant in our culture for romantic relationships? Or could it be that there are one or two people who the Lord has called us to, that we're to make promises to? Come what may, I will stand with you. And when the rubber hits the road and it becomes difficult, the reason that we stick with them is not actually because they're worth it. It's not actually because they're perfect. And vice versa when they stick with us. What it is it's because of the gospel. It's because he came to be with us, he stayed with us, and he died for us. And he asks us to do likewise for others. If we're not living out the gospel in our friendships, I don't know where we're going to be living it out. It's choosing to do it in that place. And we're going to talk more about this as the weekend goes on. But the final thing I want to say on it is just there's this little verse that comes in John chapter 13, verse 35. And Jesus says, "By this shall all men know that you are my disciples, that you love one another." This isn't simply for us. This is because we live in the Western world, and Mother Teresa is known to have said the greatest poverty of the Western world is the poverty of loneliness. As believers and followers of Jesus Christ, he invites us to a rich and deep friendship with him, but also with one another. And as we have that, and as we are that, we become attractive for those outside.